We'll start. Thank you all of you for joining us today for this webinar around HR strategy. Our key speaker today is Claes, our very own people and culture director within Manpowergroup in Belgium. We'll give you some insights about building blocks and give a dive into the importance of recognition. Dimitri, indeed, the microphones are blocked. We cannot see you, we cannot hear you, but you can have all the questions you want in the chat. I will be answering we will be with Steven answering it at the end of the webinar. So I will manage the chat so that Steven can focus. Steven joined Manpowergroup after some year of experience. I will not give the exact figure, Steven, but I think we can say that you've had a broad experience in the HR world, starting yourself as a consultant, which makes sense for your presence today, as we're also providing HR consultancy services within Jefferson Wells. And I think we can say that you've worked in lots of different sectors through your whole experience, from fast-moving consumer goods to energy, to services, to finance, and then finally human people and human workforce within Manpowergroup. Again, all the questions can be popped in the chat, and you don't have to take notes or anything because the webinar is being registered, and you will all receive a link by Friday to go and watch it at will on our website. Steven, I'll leave you the audience, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mathieu. Just a remark, it feels like I'm getting old if I'm listening to the introduction. So many companies, so many years on my counter. But you know, this is not the only aspect which counts, I think. I still feel full of energy. So for me, that makes me going. To start off with a quote. Leadership for me is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. And I do want for you to reflect around this during this presentation, because this is basically where everything that I will be talking about today is around. So bear this in mind and stick with me. And thanks for sure that you are all here on this sunny Tuesday afternoon, because I can imagine that you would rather be outside, and maybe you are, because you're all at home, or most of us are at home. So please, if you can, just sit in the garden and enjoy the sun. I would do the same. So don't hesitate to do that. So kicking off, I'm really thrilled that I can talk today about the subject of recognition. It's an important subject, because a lot of our companies today, they are really going through a state of change, a state of transformation. And if we want to bring the right motivation to people, so basically improving business results in difficult times, there's only one way you can do it. And that's by, well, there are many ways, but one of the best ways to do it is through bringing engagement levels up. And one of those means for me is recognition. It's an important piece of the puzzle. So this is really what I want to talk to you about today. And if there are a few things in my head, at least, that you need to recall after this session, it's basically 4 bullet points. The first bullet point for me is that recognition, and you can talk also about well-being, but recognition is key in current HR practices. It should be, for me, not something which really stands alone. No, you should look at it from a holistic side. And for me, this is part of performance management. So, recognition is key. The second bullet is behavior for me is a function of its consequences. And I repeat myself, bear this in mind, behavior is a function of its consequences. Remind this, it's an important piece. A second piece, or a third one, better, is recognition should link directly to not a happy-clappy type of recognition. No, it should link to 3 things for me. It should link to results, it should link to attitudes, and it should link to live events. That's the third bullet point. And the fourth one I do want to recall at the end of this session is recognition can be both positive, but surely also negative. And HR has a key role to play in making this happen. So this might look strange, But this is really key. So 4 bullets, not more than that. So remember this after this session, and you will have made my day this sunny Tuesday. So let's kick off with the basics. If I talk always about the subject, I don't want to see this subject as a standalone thing. For me, recognition is something that we need to look at from a bigger picture. And the bigger picture for me is the HR strategy. That's why I call it in the introduction, what are the basics of an HR strategy and how does recognition link into that? And so, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk you a little bit through the building blocks of HR. For some, it might be new. For others, it might be something that they've done already in the past. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So for me, the first building block of an HR strategy is basically linking to these words. And I hope at least that the majority of you, and don't feel bad if not so, but the first building block of an HR strategy is looking to what I call the VUCA world. We are all living into, and it's an abbreviation of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We only need to look to the current COVID crisis that we're in today to just explain you what this is about. The world is very volatile and uncertain, and we don't know how to solve this problem. It goes up, it goes down. We never know what the right solution will be. So we're living in a very complex environment and never know exactly what the solution will be. And that's why we all need to be agile in the way that we operate in our company. So basically, the first building block is bear in mind that this world of today is not the world of yesterday any longer, and that we need to really look to this world that we're living in. So that's the first building block. The second one is we need to put on some glasses from an internal side of the company, but also from an external view. And what do I mean with that? If you look to an HR strategy, we need to do this SWOT analysis of the organization. If you look with internal glasses, just look to in every domain of your organization, what are the strengths that we can use? What is it that a company is built upon? But also, what is it that makes us weak in a way? What is it that we don't use enough or cannot use enough for some kind of reason? And you do it with all your functional leaders, with all your brand leaders, with all the people, the stakeholders in your company, and try to get a good view on that. That's basically looking to the internal world of your company. But that's not okay. That's not enough. You also need to look to the external world and really say, okay, what are these opportunities that are there? What are those strengths that we have in our company? And how can we use it to build our HR strategy upon? But also the threats, of course, what could make that in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, we become obsolete, that our company is disappearing. So really look to these kind of threats that are also there and combine everything together and build an HR strategy based on that building block. Now, this is only, again, one of the building blocks, but a very important one, as you can imagine. It's basically the analysis of your organization together with the VUCA world that we're living in. The next one that will appear on the slide is not something that I invented, of course not. It's something I tend to read a lot, and if I read with Jacob Morgan, and probably a lot of you will know Jacob Morgan, and if not, I urge you once to have a look at it. He talks about the skills of the future, right? What are the skills of the future that we all need in order to survive in the world that we're living in today, in this VUCA world? And I will walk you through very briefly these skills. And one of the main and key skills, and I don't need to tell you that, is learnability. It's skilling, upskilling, reskilling. And I repeat, skilling, reskilling, upskilling all the time. And that means that we need to have a really, really growth mindset. It's comparing to the fixed mindset. But at this stage, it's not enough to go to the university, study there for 4 years, 5 years, and think, oh, now I'm done. I can move along in the world and I can work wherever I want. No. Even today, tomorrow, we will need to upskill ourselves, simply for the reason that this world is changing so drastically. So this skill, learnability, and having a growth mindset is key. Another one is the digital savviness. We were all dropped into the Teams modus like we are today. All of a sudden, from day 1 to day 2, we all needed to Zoom, Teams, Google, whatever it is there, Miros, and so on. All these tools, it became a part of daily life. So that's just one example, but the full of our companies are full of digitalization. So this is something, and it links to learnability, that we need to have. It's digital savviness towards the future. Another important piece is collaboration. It's also a key competence of the future. Collaboration, previously, if I talk 10 years ago, you could still survive in your own silos, in your own company even. But that's not the reality of today anymore. We need to cross-collaborate across the functions in a company, but also outside our company, networking across the different entities that are there, across the different countries that are there. I come from a very, very global company in my past, so it is pretty key to start collaborating across our borders as well. So collaboration, for sure, if we want to survive in the VUCA world, is key. So it is also an important brick in order to build an HR strategy of the future. And the purpose of today is, the subject of today is recognition, and that links for me to accountability and speaking up. It is basically around feedback giving, feedback receiving, and being able to move on. So people in their jobs, they need autonomy, they need mastery, they need purpose, and that's exactly what this means. We need to move on, and we need to become accountable for what we do, and people need to have that feeling of, as I said, autonomy. And that's what I mean with accountability, but what also Jacob Morgan means with accountability. Then what else is there? It's all about, agility. I will not detail too much about it. I think a lot of you know what this means. We don't need any more these fully worked out products. No, we need to move on, move quickly, and become into a modus of minimum viable products instead of the full product and testing it at the end. So agility becomes key towards the future, as is, and that's an important one, as is servant leadership. And remember, servant leadership, I just gave you a quote at the start. This is basically what I mean. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. I talked about autonomy. I talked about mastery. I talked about purpose. I mean, if those three elements are there, and that's basically the intrinsic motivation of employees, and we can work on those, well, then you're a very good leader. And that's what you need to give to your people. You need to give them that autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that all in a communicative and listening style. I mean, COVID has made clear to all of us that we need to listen to our people, that we need to communicate a lot to our people, and far more frequent than we did in the past. So do it in an empathic style, and you're sure, or you will become sure that your organization, but also your employees, will become resilient in the future. But this is, for me, the third building block, and it's just something which you need to put into your backpack and say, okay, I need to make sure that these things are there for my organization and that I can build upon it for the future. What else is there as a building block? That's basically your mission, your vision, and your purpose. I talked already about purpose. People need to know, why the hell do I get out of bed each and every morning? And translating that, your purpose and your mission and your vision, into what we all have in our companies, values and behaviors attached to those values, will also be very important to build your HR strategy upon. So I put here the values that we have, and they are also very strong. It's about people, it's about knowledge and innovation, and we call them we care, we dare, and we share. So bring that along and think about it as well to build upon a strategy. This one is important, of course, but it gets different. If I go back 10 years in my life, I could say that companies were still building strategies on a 3-year term. If you look now to the companies, what you see is it's 1 year at the max, and it gets even more to 6 months or 3 months. So strategies are important to take along, but the term or the length of the strategy will reduce drastically in these times. Another one is all around engagement, and that's also linking again to the discussion of today. It's recognition. You know, engagement is basically the willingness to do the extra mile. That's one thing. But on the other side is also the intent to stay of an employee. Yeah? Basically, is it a rational element or an emotional element? But that's what we need to know. Engagement of our employees, that's what we as HR professionals are working on each and every day. And that's also a building block of your HR strategy. And finally, but very important, is also, I talked about looking with external glasses to the external world. It gives you indications what is going on in the world. And what you see here is it's something which Gartner published. It links to these competences of the future that I just mentioned. If you look to the 1 to 5 elements that are mentioned there, they all link to that key competences of the future. If you look to the first one, it's all about learnability. Remember, learnability, growth mindset, skilling, upskilling, reskilling. The second one, it's all about the VUCA world that we're living in, change management. And if we change, we also need to change our organization. So our new ways of working, you see that appearing on place 4, future of work. I guess a lot of you are working at this stage on the concept of new ways of working in your companies. So it's not so strange to see it appearing in this top listing. And finally, at number 3, leadership bench. We talked about servant leadership. We talked about what does a leader need to look like, and do we have these people on board? So we need to skill them, upskill them. Again, to point 1 of this slide. So this gives you a good idea. And it links to what Jacob Morgan says. It gives you a good idea that what you're doing is basically okay. It doesn't mean that all the rest is less relevant, because it's also talking about technology, etc. I think it just shows you a little bit what needs to be in your backpack and to build an HR strategy of your company. Now, all these elements together, all the things that I just showed you, they will result at the end, hopefully, into an HR strategy in which recognition will fit. Now, an HR strategy, as I see it, is composed of these elements. It's about attraction, it's about development, it's about engagement, it's about reward, and underneath all of that is the operational excellence element. So what should you do if you look to these elements or these bricks of an HR strategy? If you look to attraction, for instance, you might need to increase your employer brand name, or you might need to strengthen your recruitment strategy, redefine roles and responsibilities in this agile world. Or you might need to set up a new onboarding program to accelerate the integration of newcomers. If we are in this virtual world, we all needed to adapt ourselves. That's the piece of attraction, but that doesn't link too much at this stage to recognition. The development side, though, for me, becomes important, because there you create a learnability culture. You develop critical capabilities to ensure that you have the necessary leadership. You grow the people management bench strength, etc., etc. But development for me, and I get to that in a second, is a piece of performance management. And in performance management, for me, is situated recognition. I get to that in a second. Also, engagement is clear. I talked a lot about mission, vision, strategy. People need to understand their contribution to the purpose of the company, to the strategy of the company, and they need to live that strategy, but they also need to live the values that I just showed. If we talk about Manpowergroup, we care, we dare, we share. How do we incorporate these? And you need probably to increase your employee collaboration. Remember, Jacob Morgan talked about collaboration. You need to increase that. And how will you do it? Through new ways of working, for instance, working from home, working from anywhere. HR tech could be there to help out, etc. So all these streams are important. I will not go through each and every one of them. But what is important is that I show you this, because for me, and that's the point, recognition is not something which stands alone. You need to be able to couple it to a story. And for me, the story is that recognition links basically to performance management. And I'll show you in a second how performance management could look like as a principle. Okay, so where are we? What I'm going to show you here is a very strong quote, and I leave you a few seconds to read it. And I think that two words for me really pop out of this this slide. It's not something that I invented again. It's something which comes from the corporate executive board. And what pops out here is really engagement, the word engagement again, and the word revenue growth. It basically says, if we create engagement, we will be able to increase our business results. So for me, one of the key elements to increase or create engagement is recognition. It's a key element, but as I said, not the only element. Engagement, again, is the willingness to do the extra mile in your company, but it's also the intention of an employee to stay rationally and emotionally with the company. Engagement can also be created through, for instance, leadership, or creating the right work environment, or setting the right rewards, or making sure at least that the basic needs of belonging are fulfilled. But today, again, we're talking about recognition. The agenda that I will be dealing as from now, so you see here, this is the quote. What you see is, I will link this to performance management recognition. So recognition leads to better engagement, leads to higher performance, leads to better business result. This is what I'm stating here. But this is not yet the concept which is lying underneath recognition. And I will get to that on the next few slides. Now, to place recognition in a holistic view, this is what you see here. I do want to tell you what, for me, performance management should look like. And the first piece is the piece around strategic alignment. So I told you strategic understanding of employees is important. So we need to translate our strategy from a group level into individual contributions. That's phase one. So everybody needs to really understand, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? So people need to have a clear understanding, what can I individually contribute towards that strategy? That's point A for me in performance management. If people don't know it, yeah, you cannot ask them to be a high performer because they don't know what they're striving for. That's point A. Point B is, we need to talk about compensation. How will our compensation support performance? It can be done through long-term incentives, but it can also be done through short-term incentives and even through base pay. And thirdly, development and career is also a pillar of performance management. If you know your strategy, we're standing here today and we want to be at point X tomorrow, and this is the gap. Well, how are we going to fill this gap? So we need to start working on development in order to get a high-performance organization. And finally, yes, finally, we get to the topic. We get into recognition. How will recognition be an important piece to trigger engagement, to trigger higher performance, and at the high end, improve business results? This is what I wanted to show you, and I can show it also in another holistic view. This is really key. It's just the concept of performance management in which recognition for me gets a place, both positive as negative recognition. And what is important here is what you see at the bottom of the slide. Basically, each of these streams will be influenced by behaviors. And it's that exactly what is key. Behaviors are a function of the consequences attached to these behaviors. This is the key concept of this presentation. It's also the key concept of recognition, because as you will see in a minute, this is what Skinner had in mind when he talked about behaviors and the ABC model. But I get to that in a second, don't worry. So just to avoid a lot of semantic discussions, I want to tell you a little bit about what is recognition and what is not recognition. There's a lot of confusion in the world about incentives and recognition. Both are not the same. I want to tell you, both are totally not the same. If I talk about an incentive, and that's what you see on the left side, it's typically something which is in the future. It's something which is based on short-term objectives which need to be obtained or not after a period of time. It's really uncertain. The fact if you obtain an incentive or not, it depends on the achievement of results and assessment of KPIs. The moment you get the incentive, it's hopefully considered a positive benefit. So it's both positive, but it's delayed because I don't know it, and it's uncertain. So if you do this, you will get that. I can already tell you today, and that's maybe something which is good for another session. But what I would suggest to you is once to look to Dan Pink. Probably a lot of you know Dan Pink, and he talked about the puzzle of motivation. And what he says is, it's typically the carrot and the stick. The carrot and the stick. If you do this, you get that, and that's typically what we do with incentives. And I can tell you, based on science, this is not working. So this is something which we take from the 20th century, but this is something which is not working. It's working for very mechanical work. If you need to put 20 stickers on the wall in 3 minutes, and you give an incentive to that, those people that get an incentive will do that quicker than people who did not get an incentive. That's what I mean with very mechanical jobs. If you look to cognitive thinking and cognitive people who need to solve complex problems and you attach a bonus to it, they will not, and it's really scientifically proven, they will not do it quicker than people who don't get a bonus, but who are recognized for their job, who are given autonomy, mastery, and purpose, as I just said. So it's really key to understand that, but it's not the purpose of today. But still, I think it's useful for you guys as HR professionals or other professionals to have a look, because that's a really strong TED talk. So look it up. It's called Dan Pink, The Puzzle of Motivation. It's nice to have a look at. But today, again, we're looking to the right side of this slide, and we're talking about recognition, and that can be both positive as negative. We don't allow our managers to run around and allocate all the time checks or bonuses or cash. No, these managers, for me, they will need another set of tools in order to motivate and inspire the right results and behaviors. We need to add what I call certainty to the system. Certainty. Incentive, uncertain. Recognition is very certain. I saw you do this, and I tell you today, I recognize what you did. Or I saw you made a mistake. I tell you now what you did wrong, So this is very certain. Here are the objectives, you make them, and I reinforce immediately that behavior. So recognition for me, that's really something which we should allocate immediately, directly, if we see the behavior, and reinforce immediately. So that's really what I'm talking about here. That's what I call recognition. So it's always good, and I wanted to show you this slide anyway, that you know the difference if people talk about an incentive or they talk about recognition. So now let's move to the core of this presentation. I'm going to talk to you now about the ABC model of Skinner. The ABC model of Skinner, it says, and that was a second point that I did want you to remember, that is, that behavior is triggered by the consequences that are given to the behavior. So let me first explain you what this model is about. A is what I call an activator or an antecedent. It's a kind of psychological term which is used for an activator of behavior. So, for example, you see on the left side a traffic sign. So that's an activator of behavior, reminding you to drive 70 miles an hour. So for the purpose of today, I'm going to call this an activator. If I look to B, that stands, of course, for behavior, clear, and C stands for the consequence of my behavior. Generally speaking, as I told you, because behavior is a function or a result of its consequences, 95% of all things that people do are governed by what happens to them or does not happen to them. This is a very important statement. So I'm going to give you an example of that. And it will resonate, hopefully, with a lot of you. So let's give an example here. So let's assume, and that's pre-COVID, that you have been working late, and you have promised to your wife, your husband, to your friends, your girlfriend, whatever, that you would be at home before 7 o'clock at night to help the kids with homework. And your wife, your husband, has been giving you a hard time, a lot of grief, because you are never at home to do that. So what happens? You leave at 6:45 at the office, and you get at the highway, and you know by yourself, damn, I will never arrive in 15 minutes at home, and I will get this bad consequence. So what's going to happen? I'm going to drive 120 miles an hour. Why would I do that? Because, very simple, I want to get home and avoid the negative reinforcement of yet another late night home and the consequences. And the consequence is I will have a grumpy wife, or there will be a grumpy husband or a friend or whatever. You will have fights. So the fact of that you ignore the safety sign is a reflection of the consequence. Then the consequence is that it's going to be very negative immediately, and definitely certain if you arrive home at late. So it will happen to you. They will be grumpy if you're not at home in due time. But what happens? And that's what you see on the right side. All of a sudden you see a flashing light in your rear windscreen. And what's going to be the consequence of that? You should have driven 70 miles an hour, and now you drive 120 miles an hour. You will get a speeding ticket, but that's not all. What will happen is you will lose your driver's license. And that's something in your mind which is not very good. So what will happen the next time that you are in a similar situation? Well, most people, I say most people, would ease off the accelerator and slow down. Why? Well, in this case, in just what I mentioned, the negative consequence of your speeding fine, and losing your license, has become far more immediately, far more certain than arriving home late. So the flashlight was merely the activator, the A, for the different behavior. But the consequence of what happened later on is what made you change your behavior. So that's an example of the ABC model. So 95% of our behavior is a result of the consequence attached to the behaviors that we do. I'm going to give another example, which is maybe easier, but it's a little bit the same, because some of you might be working into manufacturing sites. So if I look to safety, it could be that the activator says that I need to wear safety glasses in the factory to protect my eyes based on safety guidelines. What could be a positive reinforcement of that? It could mean that an EXCO member says to a plant manager, or to me, for instance, he says, well, Steven, you know what? I saw the statistics on eye safety for your plant. And he says they look very outstanding compared to the KPIs we set. Fantastic job, Steven. You are considered exemplary in your industry. So keep up that good work. The great efforts put in are really top. How do you think I feel? For me, this is really a positive reinforcement, which will make me do more of the same and even excel in that area. But on the other side, it could have been that I didn't do my job so good, so that there could have been a negative reinforcement. So an EXCO member could say to me, hey, Steven, I saw your statistics on eye safety, and looking to that, there are really, really issues at your plant. So as we have more accidents as anticipated, what are you going to do about that, Steven? This is really a negative reinforcement of a superior who's asking for the next steps. And he's making me think about moving forward in that area. And a second time, he will come over. I hope at least that I've thought about the actions to achieve that safety KPI, so I could show a better story. If not, the EXCO member could become stronger to me, or he could impose some sanctions to me. So the consequence attached to not having that KPI in the right way gets for me more immediately and more certain, and I will probably start changing my behavior as well. So basically, what I'm saying here under this model is this. So all the A's that you see standing here, and we know a lot of these A's in our companies. There are info sessions, there are policies, there are posters, procedures, whatever is existing, they tell us how we should behave. But this, for me, this is only a critical element, but will only give you 5% of the behavior that you require. It's not because I have a policy or I have a procedure that people will start acting that way, right? And I guess a lot of you will resonate with that. It is very important that we need to focus on the 95% consequences of behavior, both positive and negative. So their reinforcement will come into play, and we do want to get that type of reinforcement in our companies, based, of course, on rules and policies. So I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying they only have an influence of 5% on the behaviors that we do. So if you think about it, what is actually going on in people's heads? It's simply the way that we bring up our children. Eh? That's actually what we're doing. We reinforce the right behavior and we try to correct the wrong behavior when we observe it. So for me, and it's just a translation, business results are simply the outcome of many behaviors. And if we know where we want to go to, we can direct the behaviors into that direction by positive reinforcement, mainly positive reinforcement, but also negative reinforcement. If we want to achieve our balanced scorecard, remember, if we do want to achieve our strategy, it's damn important that we act immediately on what we see. And we don't wait with, for instance, incentives, because that's only into the future and that will not help us move forward. So it's really, really key that we do understand that behavior is triggered by its consequences. This is the core of what I do want you to remember. It's also the core of how recognition works. I gave you a few examples, so bear with me. This is really, really key. So I'm saying there's also a negative reinforcement, right? But as in any business thing, I think the negative reinforcement, there's a kind of rule of thumb which says that for every 4 positives, you can deliver 1 negative. So bear this in mind. If you want to stay credible, if you want to maintain the effect of recognition, don't start doing all the time negative reinforcement, because honestly, that will not work. For every 4 positives, you can have 1 negative. Okay. So this was the concept, the really core concept of recognition. If I then start looking to what the drivers are of recognition, I told you this at the start of my presentation as a third bullet point. So drivers for me for recognition, we are not in a happy clappy culture. And what do I mean with that? We're not in a culture where I'm sitting here at my desk and I have a beautiful desk which is very clean, and my boss comes saying to me, "Hey, well done, Steven. You have done a great job. Your office is clean. Good." No, that's not how it works. It's not that what we're looking for. No, recognition should be linked to 3 things for me. The first thing it should be linked to is results. Remember, our main objective of improving business results through strategy execution. So the focus should be on recognizing the achievement of results in line with the strategy execution. And that can happen through different means. Some companies still might have a balanced scorecard, but it's simply linking to the strategy execution. That is key. It should not be limited to our high performers only, because that's a mistake that's often made as well. We tend to be very open towards or recognizing towards high performers. No, everyone should be able to be recognized for the things that they're doing, because stimulating behavior in the right way, how small it is, will make sure that people start changing their behavior. Remember, behavior is a function of its consequences. So try to involve as much as possible people in that. So first driver of recognition is results. Second driver of recognition is attitudes. So what do I mean with that? I just referenced you to our core values at Manpowergroup. We care, we dare, we share. If you translate those values into behaviors and you see people acting accordingly to these behaviors, just tell them immediately. Tell them, well, you're really good, and you're linking our values towards the strategy execution. So attitudes, for me, the behaviors linked to our values, are the second element which we should recognize. So try to translate your values into actionable behaviors. It's really, really important. And a final one, which you see appearing on the slide, is live events. We do want to create an environment of inclusion of all our employees. Events like a birthday or a birth of a child or a marriage or a promotion, please recognize people for that, because it's good to be remembered and it makes us all feel part of the same team. So in a nutshell, you see what's important: recognize results, recognize attitudes, and recognize live events. Okay, I hope you're still with me. What is also important is, you remember I gave you the holistic slide. I skipped a few slides, but this one is the important one. At what level are you going to recognize what? So if you look at a group and a BU level into a company, you will be mainly focusing on recognizing the achievement of results. It's basically what we have done, not how we have done it, because it's very difficult to link it to a few persons or so on. So at that level, if you talk on a BU and or a group level, you recognize people basically for results. If you go down to the team level, there it becomes important also not only to recognize the results, but also the way they have gotten to these results. Remember, I talked about the attitude, so recognizing the behaviors which are in line with the attitude. So the how of achieving the results are important to be recognized at the team level or at an individual level. As I said, at an individual level, you add the piece of life events. So you add the birthdays, the marriages, etc. So that's at the different levels in the organization what you can recognize. Finally, now I'm going to talk to you about how to look at recognition. And again, this is my personal view. It could be different by you guys, but what I'm posing here and what I'm putting here is how you could look potentially at recognition. And there is some rehearsal in there, but repetition makes sure that you remember what I said. So first of all, if you look at recognition, you recognize results, attitudes, and life events. It's really about creating a recognizing environment for achieving results through our attitudes and integrate not only 20% of the high performers, but really everyone in the company for being there and getting towards the desired results. That's A. B, let's make it a very informal process. Don't start again writing these rules. As I just mentioned, it should be really, really informal. And as in the first instance, make it really non-monetary. If you don't have a culture of recognition, if you want to install a culture of recognition, don't start with the carrot and the stick principle. Start really with a non-monetary system based on the principles that I just explained. There are tools on the market to provide the recognition, but again, the tool is only there for 5% of the outcome. The 95% of the change will happen through impacting behaviors of people. So that's key. Okay. What else is there? Yeah. I mean, you can, of course, do recognition in group settings, but you can also do it on an individual level, as I said, or on a team level. You simply always need to bear in mind and check the most appropriate way in bringing in recognition. Look always to the specific situation at hand for recognizing teams and individuals. So that's an important one. Another one, and this is damn key for me, is this that you need to bring your message best in a face-to-face way. And that means we now have Teams, we now have Zoom, we have now all these tools available. If you have something to be recognized, do it in a team setting, do it in a face-to-face setting. That's the strongest message that you can give to somebody. That doesn't mean that you cannot do anything else, but face-to-face contact has been proven to be the most and the best way to recognize people with the most impact. If you want to have other methods like stickers or events or online platforms or etc., it's okay. It's okay. It's a surplus on top, but always start for me with the face-to-face way of giving recognition. Then it's not about the prize, but it's all about the praise. You know, you want to create a culture of recognition in your company. So in first instance, don't do it non-monetary. You know, only in a second phase, when you start thinking, you can even start thinking about adding monetary items to the recognition if you feel confident that your culture of recognition is put in place in a proper way. Remember, again, and that's repetition, the carrot and the stick principle is not the right way to move forward. Then, everyone. Yes, try to reach everyone. I just mentioned not only the high performers, but try to reach everyone. And what do I mean with that? It's not only your internal employees, but for instance, you might have freelancers there. You might have temp labor who's sitting there. You need to make sure that everybody feels included in the same way and recognize everybody. It's not a high five recognition system. As I said, it's not as this happy clappy type of recognition. No, it's really recognizing them for results and showing the right attitude. So include everybody in there, going from employees to freelancers to whomever is there. That's really key. So if you want to change your culture, really do that. Make it also a personalized experience. So, and that could be both from a receiver side as from a giver side. The receiver might want an individual recognition above a group setting, or vice versa. He might even like better a group setting. So the giver, on the other side, he also needs to be genuine in providing recognition. So if you all of a sudden set up a recognition system in your company and all of a sudden this manager is going to give recognition, which he never did, and he does this like very frequently, it might look strange to people and it might look like, I'm not trusting this. So personalized means bear in mind the personality of both parties to do the right thing. So that's what I mean with make it very personalized. Then you might debate about it, but management should lead by example, right? It's basically the management who need to be ambassadors of this program. If it doesn't start there, I can tell you it will never work. You need to have them on board, and they need to recognize as much as possible based on results, attitudes. If they're not in the game, then my advice would probably be not to start with it. So they should make it a part of their daily lives in order to make this program get a return on investment. So an important piece is make your management lead by example and try to convince your top management about the need of this. And you have a strong quote that I gave you at the start. This is another one, but that links basically to the management to lead by example. I refer to it to a top-down process. So start at the top. They need to give the example. A peer-to-peer recognition system is also okay. A bottom-up, I would only suggest to start doing that as from a second phase. You need to install this culture before you go to a kind of bottom-up process in terms of recognition. An important one as well, as I worked and I've seen this in different companies, there's a think global, act local. I've had some experience in global companies. We need to bear in mind the regional differences in recognition. In China, for instance, a group setting is not the preferred way of recognizing, but there rather an individual face-to-face setting will work. Whilst if you go to the US, the trend is more to go for public recognition. The more people are involved, the better. So it may be overgeneralizing, but high level, this is what I mean with this expression. Bear in mind also the cultural differences across the globe. And finally, but very important, is the whole piece on recognize the recognizer. If you see somebody recognizing in your company based on results, attitudes, live events, you can tell him that he has done a great job by doing this and by installing that culture. Because if you do that, from that end on, you will start instilling your desired culture of recognition. Now, what are tools you have at your possession to do recognition? I can tell you, as I said before, tools will only trigger, again, 5% of the right behavior. For me, they are only a critical means to install that behavior and provide the necessary backbone in your organization. But what you really need is changing the behavior of people. And how? By influencing the consequences attached to it. Again, the ABC model, remember it, it's really key. Behavior is a function of its consequences. So don't start working out tons of documents or templates or whatever, but rather provide insights in how to recognize. Remember, feedback, accountability, autonomy, mastery, purpose. So provide insights in how to recognize at different levels through workshops, through guidance around giving this type of continuous feedback, and to start off with in a non-monetary way. The moment you are more mature in recognizing, I don't mind if you step into a monetary system, but the culture really needs to be there. So I will go back to the start of my presentation. Remember, I did want you to remember 4 things, and I'm gonna rephrase them. I believe recognition is key in current HR practices. For me, it's part of performance management and should not be looked at standalone. So it's part of a bigger story. That's A. B, again, that's the most important piece to remember. Behavior is a function of its consequences. The 95% consequences work on that. So give employees the feedback they deserve or ask for to grow in their role. So remember that behavior is a function of its consequences. C, recognition for me should link directly to results and attitudes, but also live events for inclusion. So it's not the happy clappy recognition, but really linking it to results and attitudes and live events. That's C. And D, recognition for me is both positive as negative. Remember the 4-to-1 rule, and HR has a key role to play in making this happen. So this is really what I wanted to tell you today. It's a high-level overview of how an HR strategy is built, how recognition is tied to that, and how I see recognition working. This is what I wanted to tell you, but before ending, I'm going to read an important quote. For me, this is all about recognition, and after that, I will end, and I'm going to read it. So it says, people may not remember what you say, they may not even remember what you do, but they always will remember how you made them feel. I feel this as such a strong quote, and this is what I wanted to give you today. So thanks a lot for listening. And Mathieu, I give the word back to you.
Thanks a lot, Steven, for your involvement in this webinar and sharing all those thoughts with us. Really much appreciated that you support Jefferson Wells that way. I'll have a look at our chat because it seems that people have been absorbed by your sayings and your presentation, because no question has been popped. So 2 solutions: or they were absorbed, or were so crystal clear that there are no questions. So maybe I would start with 1 question to you, waiting and maybe inspiring some people. We're talking about recognition in the biggest part of this presentation, but out of all those programs you have implemented, what is the own recognition that has marked you the most on a personal level?
That's what I said, is a face-to-face recognition. I mean, I cannot repeat myself enough. It's basically when you see somebody doing something, and also my boss, who immediately says to me, "Hey, Steven, this was great done," or even it's not okay done. You know, it learns you such a great deal, and I think for me that's the most important piece. So that piece is damn critical, face-to-face for me.
Okay, and out of the different recognition you have you implemented a lot of things, and on really the implementation side, have you maybe best practices to share with us?
Best practices. I mean, as I said, there's not a lot of tons of document. I think what you need to do is really work with people on giving feedback and receiving feedback, and that's where you need to build your people. The knowledge of the people, the upskilling, the reskilling into that area is important, because some people will have a natural style to recognize people, other people will not have a natural style. And what's typically there is that people don't know very good how to give good feedback. You have the SBI models, you have non-violent communication styles. So you need to upskill, as I said, you have this point 1 in the Gartner, it's upskilling, reskilling. So it's really key that people are able to give the right feedback. So I can talk a lot about that I develop posters, and this 5% are posters, documents. You have tools on the market, like, for instance, we at Manpowergroup, you know that, Mathieu, we have a Jammer, where you see sometimes a lot of recognition given to people. But there are also online platforms in the HR tech world that you can use. But again, and I keep on stressing this is 5%. This is the critical tool you can use in order to start changing the behavior. But the 95% other piece should be done to exactly what I said, and that's basically giving these types of workshop around giving feedback. Because if you start there, it gets damn easy to start giving recognition.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'll give room for guests today to see if there's any question coming in the chat. I don't have anyone at the moment. And if no one's coming, I just take time to remind everyone that this video the link to the video will be sent to you by end of this week. Should you afterwards have a question for us, do not hesitate to ask it by email in answering the mail with the link. And I don't see any extra question coming in chat. So once again, Steven, thanks a lot for your time today. Thanks a lot for sharing those thoughts with us. And I'm sure that this will be helping our guests today to go further in developing their own recognition model.
It was my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy the end of afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.